One of the interesting things that I guess we like to try and do, assuming that we're not going to risk life and limb, right, going into the dungeon, is really just starting to understand, start looking at the software. So things that operate in parallel. So not impacting operations, but can we actually look at the software? Can we actually look at the processes, the state of the processes, how the data is being stored, and how is it currently accessible? So those kind of things give us enough initial telemetry to hopefully skirt some of the traps, pitfalls, axes, or whatever else is down there in the lurking, in the lurking bits. But I think that provides what I call great foundation to start.
Welcome to the Information Week Podcast. I'm Senior Editor Jean-Pierre Ruth, and in today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at moving beyond internal modernization and actually trying to achieve value creation and ROI for organizations. Happy New Year. This is the first episode for the new year for the podcast, so welcome back to everybody. And in today's episode, we are going to be speaking with Antoine Shagoury, the CTO for Kyndryl. Antoine, did I get that correct?
Perfect.
Great. Awesome. And we have Russell Levy, Chief Strategy and AI Officer for ZoomInfo.
Hey.
Russell, good to be speaking with you as well. Okay, great. All right. Well, again, Happy New Year. And thank you both for being here today. So modernization is definitely changing with the AI era that we're in. It's meaning a lot of new things for a lot of organizations. That's not the only element of modernization, but it is definitely adding new wrinkles to what organizations are looking for, and also to what the operations side of the team might be looking for from the results from that. So both of you, just want to see if we can kind of like start off by looking at how your organizations, kind of like really feel about the need to keep pace with how things are evolving right now. AI and other recent IT innovations that are coming on, do you feel a need to have a clear path from here's the innovation that we're introducing and this is what the result is going to be on some kind of timetable? Either of you, please lead off on your perspectives on that.
I guess I could jump in if you like. I'm happy to do it. And Jean-Pierre, appreciate the opportunity today. So I guess the way I want to characterize it, little less to kind of defining the result or the capability. It's more of actually how do we make sure we have the right tooling, the approach, methodology in the portfolio, because the questions really are less about the actual act of modernization. And there's probably a discussion also what people are defining as modernization right now, but where we really think there's an opportunity to help define what the customers want to do. So I think it's a little less on the portfolio build of the tech and AI within what we're delivering as a product, more to actually how do we actually refine the solution, or at least create the focus on what the solution should be. I know it's a little different from what you wanted, but that's definitely how we're seeing this really play out.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And is there pressure to say within your organization to say okay, we are keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, with all of the cool new relatively cool things that come out with, whether it's AI or anything else, to say, okay, well, we've got that, or we've got something like that. Is there any kind of, sense of pressure to kind of like say we've got that and it's going to lead to X?
Yeah. Russell probably has more to add to this too, but I think with us, I'd love to say no, but absolutely. There's definitely a expectation, we would say it that way, that we have the capabilities to work with the latest and greatest tools. So whether it's the latest agent builders, the latest tools and language models that people are using, even what our position is on what the impact of things like quantum and compute and calculation capabilities could be. A lot of that really becomes almost like the requisite for the conversation, that we have a certain subset of experience, right? Working with the components that the clients may want to use.
Gotcha. Russell, your perspective, and again, we can kind of like focus on like what this means internally within your organization. What's that internal conversation?
Yeah, so I would say, what we've been trying to do is focus on building. We originally focused, and it was just because it was easy, on just rolling out as much of these new toolings and new technologies we can to people. And we built a platform to do that. But what we pivoted to very quickly was we do measure usage, but what's much more important is by department, what are the outcomes that each of these departments is supposed to be hitting? So are we creating efficiencies for our salespeople, as an example, that they could go, instead of spending 3 hours to create a deck, or not spending 3 hours to create a deck because they don't have time to, so they just go to the meeting with a bad deck. Now they can get a good deck made in 15, 20 minutes. Are they researching before they make a cold call to someone? Do they have in front of them all the research they need on the person in the company that they're talking to be able to do that? And for us, that's the outcome there is, what's the connection rate? What is our close rate on deals? For our finance team, our team just rolled out a tool that allows them to consult, to make sure that the data in our accounting software is the same as the data in our CRM software, that things got copied over properly. This was like a major SOX problem when the numbers got reported wrong for some reason on one of the two systems. And we rolled something out. They were able to build that very quickly because of the new technology. And so it's not just the usage, but it's also, for us, it's what those outcomes are. And we've been able to, I think, I could say honestly, there is a lot of pressure of internally, hey, why aren't you using, did you see this new DeepSeek model? Or are you using Opus, or using, GPT 5.2 is amazing. Why aren't we moving everything to that? One of the things, by being able to focus on outcomes versus what the technology is, say, hey, here are our projects. We don't think that moving to GPT 5.2 is going to move the needle at all on this specific project. It's moved it. People are getting the data they need before they make a phone call fast enough. Do you think that you're going to get that much better? Look what they're getting. Do you really think it's going to be that much better in GPT 5.2 before you ask next time? We could show you that it's not much better, but this is good enough. Because the bar is really from zero, we're going from 0 to 1 with a lot of these new stuff versus going from 80 to 90. And we're trying to get that first part, and that's the big lift that we're aiming for across the business.
Gotcha. Antoine, can you kind of chime in with are there any additional barometers that your organization uses, with when your team, the teams and even the operations people say, hey, this is what we need, this is what we're gauging against, versus what's being introduced?
Yeah, I think your question gets right to the heart of what really makes a difference in the conversation, the approach, even the advice on what to go after. So maybe I'll start indirectly. If you give me a little bit, it's kind of like the redefinition of the ROI piece. ROI is really around, are we seeing, for example, an improvement or an efficiency, almost at the metric level? Are we seeing the metrics that start to show that the components are delivering something towards the bigger recipe? So we start to look at, do we understand the workflow? Do you understand the performance of it? Can we see at least how that can be equated or evaluated as it goes from efficiency to effectiveness? If we can show it's more effective, that's when we're starting to really get into that return. So now return is potentially a risk reduction. The return now, or the metric, is now on a performance improvement or a scalability or enhanced capacity. And if we really get to the other end of the extreme, when we start to look at the percentage of the workflow that's been adapted, right, to incorporate these changes. And I guess the way I could probably summarize that metric kind of shift now, and they're very much business metrics if you think about it now, not necessarily technical metrics, but we're actually really seeing that blur between that business kind of, inflection point with that technical inflection really coming together. So those are the things that we start to see. So now we're looking at the business measures as much as the performance on the technology side and infrastructure.
Let's talk about the idea of kind of conveying to other stakeholders in the organization, like the C-suite level stakeholders or even board members, that there might be shiny new tech. We were kind of to touch on this already, but the shiny new tech that might be out there, but there might not be a clear formula to what that's going to mean in terms of deliverable returns versus, again, you already talked about the chat GPT 5.2 being out, how do you work that conversation with the CFO, the CEO, at that tier of the conversation with stakeholders, and so talking to other people on the operations side, and other parts of the business might be one thing, but when, the head leadership might come in with very energetically with one perspective over the other. And then you have to say, well, not to throw cold water on your ideas. How do you have that kind of conversation in the C-suite?
Yeah. I don't know, Russell, if you want, if I have an idea or two that I kind of, just so you know, too, I do have a split brain. I've been a prior COO as well as a CTO, so it's kind of interesting to play the ping pong mentally. But I don't know, Russell, you have a comment or?
Yeah, I mean, we try to stay ahead of it, honestly, across the board. It's something I get these pins all the time. We should be trying this. We should be trying this. We should be trying this. And it's all around staying focused, and it's saying, here's the project we're working on. If this doesn't help on any of our if this is not going to move the needle, then why are we going to implement it just to go after a shiny new object? And you just have to be really focused, and you have to one of the ways we do this, one technique that I try to do very often is every project we run has to have an ROI within, say, 2 to 3 months. If it takes longer than 2 to 3 months to have real ROI across the business that we could talk about, we're going to start to get noise about maybe we took the wrong approach. People again, it's not the shiny new object anymore. When we started 3 months ago, someone's like, well, that's not a priority anymore. So we have to show, we always try to just build this out. You build it out in a way that there's different milestones, and we make sure that early milestones have some sort of ROI for the business. And this allows us to say, is this worth it to move off of this thing that we're going to have value in 3 weeks from to go try some shiny new thing that may or may not work? We could try this later for a future milestone, but we're really on the path towards this and we're not sure. There's it's a risk to go change anything now. So stay focused and make sure that the deliverables are coming up soon and the value is within eyesight.
Yeah. I think I could probably add to it too. I think
Please.
Probably say definitely, I've never seen more engagement at the C-suite, right, than ever before. I mean, in the last 3 years, it's really turned on its head. It's a phenomenal opportunity, and I think to your question, it also becomes a new challenge because the alignment amongst the CEOs, the CFOs, really starts to become a challenge on expectations. So, if you think about what our company does, we're an operator, we're a managed service provider. We help not only ideate and plan, we actually implement and look to make sure we're delivering the results. So for us, as a reframing, and it's delicate, but we're reframing a lot of the discussion less to, hey, are you using this tool? Can you bring in something to do with this capability, the agentic registries, these orchestration tools? And we bring that back into, okay, what are we looking to deliver against? And that's when we run into things like the pilots and the proof of concepts in very small subsets of a business. So we really have had to retrain ourselves, both inside as a business, because we have our internal challenges the same way as our clients. So we're constantly having to train ourselves and build methodologies to have the discussion, going back to Russell's point, on defining what the return you're looking for, what's the problem you're trying to go after, and then we test what they're looking to deliver. I could probably tell you almost too honestly, more than half the time, the discussions don't require a lot of the new tools, the AIs, the workload capabilities, just to get to the root of the challenge. So there is a reframing. I love to say there's a technical solution to this one. This is our community learning how to operate within that business context and focus on what the result is. Then we talk about how to deliver it, what tools are appropriate, and how we demonstrate that value at scale.
So let's talk about what you need, because both of you are from the C-suite tech leadership side. What do you need from the operations side, business operations side, to kind of help alleviate your headaches and trying to move forward? What works? What is the most useful, constructive thing? Is it, feedback forms? Is it putting together a team to kind of have them to do a think tank, kind of a thing from the operation side to kind of be all right, this is what we're looking for. So you can have a chance to assess and really kind of go through what their questions are. What clears the air the most? Or would you like to see done that would clear the air for what you do?
So I'm assuming magic wand is not an answer, right?
I mean, it could be in the tabletop exercise.
Right. I'm sure there's an AI model for that. Just to put, again, a simple context on it, and you frame it well. We do need kind of the three lenses at the table. So we need to get the tech ops and business ops teams at the table to really start to do that deconstruction. There is due diligence here. We have to understand how things are going, and it goes all the way down to infrastructure. It gets into the code of the applications, and the software gets into the data and how it's created. But that business usage, right? That business understanding, the business process is where we have that chasm between the two. So this is where we probably have the best opportunity, today, to have these business technology teams really be created to create that model. And it's not about just fixing one component. It's actually about rethinking how a business is performing. So it's not what they do, it's how they do it, which becomes that fuel to that concept of that new type of business technology group or team or whatever that concept could be. I think that's where I think we see the best engagement, the highest returns on the capability, and probably the most eye-opening response that the clients have not realized how their business actually runs. That transparency is very powerful, scary sometimes, but powerful.
Russell, your thoughts?
Yeah. So it's the way I'm talking about the internal stuff a little bit more than the Antoine. One of the things that we did a few months ago is we looked at all of our internal tools, and then we ran a survey and with managers, individual contributors, everyone, not everyone in the company, but every type of role. And we wanted to understand what are the process intensive workflows that we're running at the company that have 15 steps and handoffs and all these things that just slow everybody down. And that could be anything in the world, but if you need something that needs person A to do something, then person B, and they're waiting and they need feedback, they have to go back to person A to go fix something. Those are the things that we're trying to approach. So when I think of like what operations can help with, let's document all of these processes that we have. And it could even be a ServiceNow ticket coming in. What's the process for me to get access to a specific tool? Are there there could be 3-4 people involved because someone has to submit a ticket, and then someone has to see the ticket, and someone has to get approval from the application owner to be able to do this. And you need to make sure you go with the billing to go add a license. There could be 4 or 5 people involved just to get access to to go upgrade your Zoom license. And these are the types of things that we try to identify and with the business owners, and what are the most painful and what are the ones that are going to affect the business the most. It's like if it takes a day to get a license, it's not the end of the world. But there's some stuff that we just didn't realize that we could go fix. And what we've been trying to do is help humans get through those processes faster. So it's going to be hand-holding you through it, that it gets from A to B to C to D based on simple rules, because the AI plus our rules was able to determine this is a normal request. We approve 90% now. We don't need a human to look everyone over. And we only escalate the top 10% that actually need a decision. And we've been trying to roll that out. So again, what do we need from the operations is help us understand how you operate. What are the inefficiencies you did for compliance and all these different reasons that we're going to be able to help you still stay in compliance or still stay within whatever boundaries you need, but just make it faster and make it much better for the end user and for your team, that they can actually do valuable work and not just they're on queues all day.
Okay. And final question for this portion. So looking internally within your organizations, who leads or potentially should lead that conversation within your organizations to kind of ensure that the modernization, the IT modernization that you're looking at internally, meshes with what, the operations side and what the development teams are working on, to see how everyone can understand, what the company, what your organizations need, to really see the tangible results that you're looking for. Where does that start? Or like, where do you feel that kind of lead voice should be? Should it be yourselves? Should it be the CEO? Or how does it function within your organizations?
Russell, you want to go first? Up to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Internally, we found that, again, I can't say what works for every organization. So where should this be in other organizations? I can't really answer. I would say that we have 2 parts at ZoomInfo, or 2 places where we feel that it's worked. So number one is really top down. The CEO has to be, like, at least for us, the CEO has been really involved in let's actually transform this. These are amazing tools. I just saw one of these reports about employees versus C-levels, where they get value from how much time do they save a week from using AI, and the biggest gaps were at the zero. Basically, no C-level said that they save 0 hours, and no ICs were saving more than 12 hours a week. And those are huge gaps at those two ends that the C-levels were saving. So what you're seeing, and this is what I think what Antoine was saying before too, that he sees the highest engagement for the past 3 years on all of this, because they're using it, and it's giving the C-levels this ability to accelerate all their work. So why can't we get the whole business to do this? And getting that enthusiasm and that push from the top really helps. On the other side, you really need the buy-in from the foot soldiers. You need a buy-in from everybody to actually want to do this and to understand that this is actually going to help them, and to try it and to see that it helps them. So you need the push from on top, but you really need to build a culture where everybody has tried it and everyone wants to try these things and wants to use this to make their life easier.
Yeah, I probably just, it's probably an extension of the same experience. And I think to the point where, I'm going to probably say a terrible word. There's maturity happening, right, in the C-suite and the responsibilities. And on the one hand, good seeds, planting seeds are happening with those big titles from years ago, like the chief transformation officers. Now they're actually getting the agenda, but it's helping the heads of HR, the heads of finance really take the helm on what they want to see happen. And that's really starting to grow. So even internally in our company, you're seeing our head of HR really starting to ask, what's the art of the possible? How can I improve the information? How do I get it better? How do I improve response or experience, right, of the employees? And that's really growing. So it's a little bit about, I guess, the pathetic air quote comment, what about me? But that ownership matters. And I did use the shorthand before of that business technology officer. I do think there's a shift also in the CIOs. The CIOs really have an opportunity to take more business integration opportunities, right? More than just supporting the business, but scale. So again, internally with our business, our CIO has become basically the scale agent, right? The distribution, the capability provider. Hey, how can we do this better? So it's really starting to create good, or at least produce good momentum. One, ownership at the C-level. And yes, CEOs are very engaged, which is wonderful and scary at the same time. And I'll probably get in trouble for saying that. And then, when we get into the heads of the businesses, again, whether it's finance, right, an operating line of business, that's where we're seeing it happen. It's not one person, but it is a great situation where they want to understand how to do it now, not just that it's going to be, I need more power in the engine room scenario.
Great. Awesome. Well, speaking of how to do it now, it is time for my favorite part, and hopefully everyone's favorite part of the podcast. It is time for the tabletop exercise. The Ninja Turtle screen is out. Those of you who are watching the podcast, you can see the sword over my shoulder. You can probably see the shield over there behind me. It is game time, gentlemen. All right. So, for new listeners, new viewers of the podcast, this is the Questionable Ideas Are Us portion of the show, where our guests will be tasked to respond to some tabletop exercises that I've concocted based on real world situations, but blown up to exaggerated proportions, with hobgoblins, kobolds, and maybe even some gremlins chiming in to mess up their endeavors to try and help a fictional company called Questionable Ideas Are Us. For the purposes of this exercise, both the gentlemen will be essentially fulfilling the same types of roles that they hold now, but as kind of interim for Questionable Ideas Are Us to try and save the company from burning itself down, which is always what's happening. Once again, the gentlemen my guests are not responsible for the questions that they are going to be posed with. They are not responsible for the goblins, hobgoblins, kobolds, or gremlins that will be featured potentially in the shenanigans I'm about to put them through. Antoine, Russell, are you ready?
I guess so.
Okay. All righty, here we go. All right, scenario one. Questionable ideas must overhaul and migrate legacy systems that the kobolds, who the ones that lurk down in the basement, have kept under lock and key for years and years. The production team wants to adopt an AI-powered platform that will allow immediate visibility of exabytes of data that were buried in the legacy system. This will mean front-loading data to allow for such visibility and make the data much more actionable with the BizOps team, which the BizOps teams would love. Now, some of your engineers are cautioning that it's safer and more efficient to only access data as needed in this process and until the migration is fulfilled. And that until the migration is fulfilled, the legacy on-prem servers run the risk of overheating and failing from strain of this whole process. How do you structure a modernization plan that keeps hardware from crashing while also giving the business teams data that they need access to while this is all going on?
So do we start off with, I guess, goblin repellent? Do we start with that first?
that is a good idea. It's the first time somebody's tried to thwart them with that. So yes.
I think one of the interesting things that I guess we like to try and do, assuming that we're not going to risk life and limb, right, going into the dungeon, is really just starting to understand, start looking at the software. So things that operate in parallel. So not impacting operations, but can we actually look at the software? Can we actually look at the processes, the state of the processes, how the data is being stored, and how is it currently accessible? So those kind of things give us enough initial telemetry to hopefully skirt some of the traps, pitfalls, axes, or whatever else is down there in the lurking bits. But I think that provides what I call great foundation to start.
Russell, your input?
Yeah, I would try to there's exabytes of data. It's a lot of data.
Yeah, the kobolds have been hoarding it for almost centuries.
Yeah. So the question would be: is there subsets of that data? This is what I would try to do that are going to be able to get us value in a smaller amount of time. Mm-hmm. So could we have access to a petabyte of data or a terabyte of data or even a gigabyte of data that you don't have access to now that will give you business impact without overloading the servers, because we're only accessing 1% or 0.1 or 0.001% of that data on these on-premise servers? And how could we structure the problem, not to say we're trying to boil the ocean at first, but how do we start to break it down into much smaller use case where we don't get all the value we want, but we get a little bit of that value on that at the beginning, and then we could iterate, and that gives us the breathing space to go run this project and then get this migration off the ground. If it's going to take 3 years, 4 years to do it, we're still getting value over those 3-4 years.
Gotcha. The kobolds, of course, are not pleased. They don't like anybody coming down into the data dungeons that they've been keeping under lock and key for so long. So they'll be watching very, very carefully. But you seem to have navigated that quite well and adeptly. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Okay. Scenario 2. The hobgoblins, the hashtag hobgoblins, who notoriously love everything new and shiny when it comes to technology, the antithesis of the kobolds. The hobgoblins complain that the timetable for the modernization is too long. They don't like years and years. In 3 months, the competition could outpace questionable ideas, Russ, so badly it won't matter if the company adopts cold fusion powered AGI to help. At least that's what the hobgoblins claim. The hobgoblins have started multiple upgrades across the company that are starting to overlap and to collide with each other. They didn't ask for permission. They just started doing it. If this keeps up, you could potentially shorten the modernization timeframe, but the BizOps team is starting to complain that they are missing key data, including some customer information. Do you let the hobgoblins continue with their reckless behavior, even as chain of custody for the data becomes questionable? But also the hobgoblins' pinky promise that the disruptions will be brief and manageable in the long run.
Russell, you get this one first.
Yeah. It's something. Listen, like it's something. What would I do? How would I navigate this?
I'm calling HR in to fire some of the hobgoblins is also an option.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it really depends. Again, if we were talking about the first part is probably if we're running into these problems, most likely our competitors have the same problems we have, even if they're newer and more agile. And we have to make sure everyone understands that. Probably they're not going to be outpacing us in 3 months from now. And if they're going to be outpacing us in 3 months from now, if we think that like we probably don't have a chance at this point. We're not going to be able to go and turn ourselves around if they're so much better than us, and cold fusion isn't even going to help us. So let's start to like level set what we're trying to solve here. And having 5 projects that are all going to be conflicting with one another and aren't going to integrate together and are going to create a giant mess may help us in the next few months. And that's okay, but we need to make sure that in 6 months or a year from now, all of it somehow gets up into the same thing. So if it doesn't, if there's no plan at all, and this is going to be something on the side forever, we have to already start a migration plan off of those things. How do we let them use, like, it could be that we need to run these things for a little bit of time, and we need to have these little pockets of inefficiencies and garbage and whatever you want to call it. But we need to have a plan that we're all aligned, that we're going to have something that all gets together at the end. And how do we migrate from A to B? It could be creating APIs. It could be creating, I'm getting into a lot of the technical weeds there, but how do we make it that the data on the back end is going to be seamlessly moved from A to B and no one's going to know about it? We're not going to have disruption all the time. Yeah. And if we can't do that, then they have to rethink some of these projects and think about how it's going to work in a year.
I guess I'll jump in directionally. I agree 1,000%. I'd love to say this doesn't happen to us every day, 20,000 times a day. I'll kind of add to Russell's point. For us, it starts off with one, being aware of what's actually out there. How do you standardize the inputs and the outputs of the processes? And how do you make sure we understand the workflows that they built within each one of these little snowflakes? Hobgoblins like snowflakes. So I think from that standpoint, that's the best way we start to see how do we look at the horses in the race? How do we evaluate how they're producing it? But to Russell's last point, they do no harm when it comes down to how does it integrate back into what the business actually needs. So there is I guess a skill in herding cats, but when it comes down to it, though, can you create enough of the guardrails to identify where you need them to follow a standard, disclose what's been fundamentally done differently, and then how do you manage the lineage of either the data that's been produced or the metadata that we can make sure there's continuity, right? So especially if you're ever going to wind up doing what usually happens is some form of lazy parallel runs. So those things are the way in which we kind of de-risk the environment and hopefully live for the next battle in the dungeon. So,
well, the hobgoblins are all about risk because they know a gremlin or two that might have a low-yield attack nuke that they use in place of cold fusion to power what they think would work. Unfortunately, you've calmed things down and taken us from heightened levels of destruction. Okay, last scenario. The modernization is done, and the board of directors is happy until reports come that some sensitive data resources lapsed in compliance through all of this mayhem. Hasty choices were made, hobgoblins, to deal with overheating servers and to meet deadlines. Now the legal department is gearing up for a long talk with regulators with what's happened with the data. Customers have heard about the compliance lapse and are raising questions that could turn litigious. The lawyers will deal with the regulators. How do you address customer outrage, and what changes do you make for future modernization plans? But before you can act, the kobolds come back up from the dungeon. You're standing at the door of the boardroom. And they're holding up a sign that reads, "Give back the data and we'll make this go away." The kobolds proposing going back to the way things were before the modernization because that was in compliance. So how do you deal with the shenanigans that have been laid out before you here?
I went first last time, so.
Antoine, you're up.
Thanks for the hot potato. When we look at compliance issues and even compound it with regulatory requirements on top of that, on how we're handling information, at least on the client side, it starts off with transparency. So how do we understand what actually has been impacted and who's been impacted and how? As much as there's a litigation risk, that's the best way for us to kind of come back and look at what do we do to respond, either to mitigate, right, the compliance risk. How do you make sure clients realize that it's not continuing to happen? So kind of reducing it down. And I'd love to say it's not a new tactic to have what I call legacy operations say we can solve this problem. The way to stay in front of that too is making sure that you can inherit what's actually happening within the current operating environment. So for me, it is transparency. Then it gets into specific issues in the violation. And how do we handle access to the information going forward? So containment, transparency, and then we go through resolutions. That's how I would look at doing it.
Russell, your thoughts? Yeah, so I'm going to start from the. I agree with most of this, with I think everything Antoine said. I'm gonna address a couple points there that left out. So number one, when it comes to why do we not move back to the legacy stuff, we should have shown some value and we should have shown business transformation along the way. So number one was the risk that we took, and we took a risk. I mean, we failed almost, or we may have failed. We had some problems along the way, along these compliance issues, and we came back but we got benefit along the way. Was this benefit worth these compliance issues? Since they happened, if they were worth it and we could solve it, then why would we ever go back to the old system? Let's get the issues away because we had a reason we did this, and if we can get over the bridge here, we should be continuing because we're getting value from it. How do you deal with the customers? I think that's a general PR question of how do we deal how do we deal with customers when we have a data breach or a compliance issue or anything like that? I think it really depends on what the issue is here. You see more and more of that happening today, and you see different companies deal with it. It could even be uptime as a compliance issue. So I'm not sure what the issue is here. But we need to show, and this is where, to Antoine's part on the transparency, we need to explain and make sure people see exactly why this happened and why it's not going to happen and what we're doing to make sure this never happens again, or things like this don't happen again. And it's not going to be a black box of, yeah, this happened and we got to sign off that it's not going to, explain it. You see the best reports by some of the best companies out here that go through these huge reports, and they're so open about their problems, and you trust them because they understood what the problem was, and they're explaining why this isn't going to happen again, and they did that root cause analysis, and all those processes to figure those stuff out. How did we get to a compliance problem? And this is why it won't happen again, because we understand why it happened, and we're changing the way our system works to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Could I add something to John Pierre? I think and I guess for listeners to think about too, we haven't talked about it. It's operating model, by the way, too. We haven't really tested in this conversation what I think many of us we see happen. But when you look at legacy transition, evolving to something new, you need to think about how that impacts the teams themselves. How do they cross-pollinate, and how do you give them a destination of what's tomorrow for them versus staying in the basement or the dungeon, so to speak, or getting to the ivory tower? So one of the things that, and I could probably say this on a personal, outside even my Kyndryl even too, I've seen this a few times go through. If you provide that transition, you get to the answer faster. Mistakes happen. We all know. Technology is flawed, right, by definition. When you come back to it, how do you address it? And I think a lot of this equates to, are people bought into the changes? So for us, when we have legacy operations teams, they need to migrate to transitions teams, and they need to be able to move into kind of the new platform teams. So those things I think really kind of help de-risk outside of when bad things happen. I get that. But there is, I think, a good recipe when you look at modernization beyond just the technology side of it.
Well, both of you have worked very well to keep questionable ideas at rest running and not burning down, though the Cobalts have as a laurel, as a peace offering to allow this to persist. They said, well, maybe we can just take the hobgoblins, strap them to their tac nuke and launch them into the sun and get rid of them entirely for future things. All right, listen, Antoine, Russell, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
Pleasure.
Thank you for having us.